courtroom hums with sterile tension, cameras blinking like 1,000 cold eyes as the trial of Senator Whitmore edges toward its closing arguments. The marble air is thick with quiet arrogance, power dressed in silk and certainty. Then the doors creak open, and a man in torn layers steps inside. No one turns at first. He moves slowly, barefoot scraping against the polished floor, until even the stenographer's hands pause. The bailiff rises, uncertain whether to intervene or pity. Judge Price lifts her gaze, and for a heartbeat, the room forgets how to breathe. The man, Michael Raines, clutches a crumpled envelope, his voice trembling, but firm as he says, he has something the nation must hear. Laughter ripples from the defense table, but the judge's gavel silences it. 5 minutes, she says. CNN's red light glows. What began as a trial becomes a reckoning. The courtroom feels suspended in a fragile silence as Judge Price's voice steadies the air. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Raines. Use them wisely. The murmurs fade, replaced by the low hum of live broadcast equipment, the metallic scent of nervous sweat. Michael clears his throat, the sound breaking like gravel against stone. I once stood where they do. He gestures to the defense table, arguing for men who traded blood for contracts. The words slice through the polished calm, echoing off the walls with a rawness that feels almost sacred. Nathan Corbett stiffens, a flicker of panic crossing his face before he hides it behind an artificial grin. Reporters glance at each other, suddenly aware that history is unfolding. Michael continues, his voice gaining weight, the tremor replaced by conviction. You tried to bury me, but the ground refused to keep quiet. Every lens focuses, every pen freezes. 5 minutes, yet the world has already stopped counting. Michael's voice wavers, not from fear, but from the weight of memory clawing through years of silence. I was one of them, he says, eyes fixed on the senator who avoids his gaze. I drafted the contracts that sent weapons to countries already burning, and I signed the papers that buried men who spoke too loudly. Gasps ripple through the room, the kind that no camera can capture without trembling. Judge Price leans forward slightly, her tone firm but restrained. Mr. Raines, are you making a confession or an accusation? He nods faintly, both, Your Honor. His hand opens the envelope, revealing faded documents, signatures smudged by time but unmistakable. This, he whispers, is what they feared I'd show. Proof that justice isn't blind. It was bought. Nathan Corbett's face drains of color. Sarah's camera captures it all, the red tally light pulsing like a heartbeat sensing with truth. For the first time, Michael's eyes steady. I'm here, he says softly, to unbury the dead. When Michael speaks again, his tone lowers, heavy as thunder before the strike. The man who ordered it all was not the senator, he says. It was the lawyer who defended him. Heads turn sharply toward Nathan Corbett, whose smile vanishes like smoke. The air collapses under the weight of his name. He knew, Michael continues, because I worked for him. He forged the clearance, silenced the auditors, and sent me to disappear when I found the final memo. Corbett stands abruptly, objecting, but his voice cracks, betraying guilt. Judge Price raises her hand, commanding silence. Reporters scramble, whispers turning into feverish clicks of keyboards. Sarah's camera catches the moment the nation begins to shift. A story too enormous to remain confined to marble walls. Mr. Raines, the judge says carefully, you're making criminal allegations under oath. Michael nods. Mighty to prove every word. The courtroom, the cameras, the country, all lean closer, breath held in collective awe. Outside in glass towers and living rooms, CNN's feed hijacks every network. Anchorser's voices fade mid-sentence as the live courtroom broadcast fills the screens. The world watches a man who has nothing left to lose dismantle an empire built on silence. Michael lays the final document before Judge Price, a signed authorization bearing Corbett's name beside corporate seals and government initials. Gasps erupt. Reporters stamp. Corbett lunges for the papers, but the bailiff intercepts. Cameras flash like lightning in a storm of revelation. Judge Price calls for order, but her voice is nearly drowned by the chaos swelling beyond the courthouse. Phones ringing, sirens wailing, anchors shouting into microphones. Sarah, her hands trembling, whispers into her earpiece. CN confirms. This is live and verified. Michael closes his eyes, the faintest hint of peace breaking through his exhaustion. You can chain a man, he murmurs, but not the truth. The broadcast has gone global. Across airports, hospitals, coffee shops, and living rooms, screens flicker with the same image. A homeless man standing before justice, rewriting history with every trembling word. Outside the courthouse, a storm brews, gray clouds coiling like witnesses to divine intervention. Judge Price calls a brief recess, but no one moves. Even the air feels unwilling to break. Michael sits at the witness stand, surrounded by whispers, stares, and flashes. His eyes drift toward Sarah, who lowers her camera and nods softly, not as a reporter, but as a believer. Corbett is escorted out, furious, his voice lost beneath the roar of media frenzy beyond the marble walls. Detective Ortega enters quietly through a side door. Confusion etched across his face. He once ignored Michael on the streets, never realizing the man's truth would ignite the nation. Somewhere outside, sirens blend with thunder, as if the heavens themselves demand the truth to continue. Judge Price retreats to chambers, her heart pounding behind the veil of composure. The world may see her as the nation's arbiter, but at that moment, she feels like a woman staring down the weight of history. The file Michael presented rests open on her desk. Names, dates, signatures, and a truth that no system was built to hold. Her clerk trembles, whispering that federal agents are already on their way. Of course they are, she murmurs, eyes cold and calm. She glances at her reflection in the dark glass, seeing both fear and purpose staring back. Outside the door, chaos mounts. Media voices demand access. Officials call for her immediate statement. But she remains silent, holding the evidence close. Her duty is no longer to procedure. It's to conscience. The gavel on her desk gleams under the soft light, a symbol she now realizes must serve something greater than law. Truth itself. Detective Ortega watches Michael from the back of the courtroom, the face of a man haunted by his own disbelief. Years ago, he had dismissed Michael as just another vagrant with a story too wild to matter. Now that story commands the world. As the crowd buzzes, Ortega approaches him quietly. "You remember me?" he asks. Michael nods faintly. "You told me the truth," Ortega admits, voice low with shame. "And I walked away." Michael smiles, the kind that forgives without words. "You're here now," he replies. Outside, thunder cracks like judgment, shaking the windows. Ortega glances toward the reporters, then back at the man who defied an empire. "They'll come for you," he warns. "They already did," Michael says softly. But this time the world was watching. The detective's eyes harden, loyalty rekindled, guilt transformed into resolve. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Outside the courthouse, chaos reigns. Reporters shout into microphones, drones buzz overhead, and crowds surge against the barriers demanding truth. Sarah Quinn stands before the sea of cameras, her voice trembling but resolute. "What began as a simple trial has become a reckoning for the nation," she declares. "A homeless man has just accused one of Washington's most powerful attorneys of orchestrating international crimes. Behind her, Agents in dark suits push through the crowd, faces grim and unyielding. Inside, Judge Price prepares to reconvene, her decision imminent. Sarah glances toward the steps where Michael sits under a gray umbrella held by Ortega. Both men silent amid the noise. For the first time in her career, Sarah feels the story looking back at her, demanding not just to be told, but to be honored. The rain turns heavy, blurring faces, blending power and humanity into a single fragile moment of truth. Judge Price returns to the bench, but before she can speak, her clerk rushes forward with a trembling hand. A phone call on the secure line. She hesitates, then answers. The voice on the other end is calm, authoritative, almost rehearsed. Judge Price, this is the Attorney General. I strongly advise you to seal the courtroom and postpone all testimony until further instruction. Her eyes flick toward Michael, who meets her gaze without flinching. You understand the risk. The voice adds. She exhales slowly. I do, she replies. But the law doesn't pause for fear. Silence stretches across the line before a quiet click ends the call. Judge Price sets the phone down and turns back to the room. We proceed, she declares. Gasps echo. Michael lowers his head, grateful. The gavel falls once, a sound that cuts through history like lightning splitting the sky. As the rain pounds against the courthouse windows, Judge Price calls the court back to order. Michael stands again, the crumpled envelope now replaced by a thick brown folder retrieved from a hidden compartment within his coat. This, he says, his tone heavy but steady, isn't just evidence. It's a record of every man they silenced. The folder drops onto the table with a hollow thud that seems to echo through time itself. Inside lie autopsy reports, bank transfers, and letters stamped with confidential seals. Gasps ripple as he opens one, a photograph of a man found dead years ago, labeled as suicide. He was the auditor who refused to falsify the numbers, Michael explains. He called me the night before they made sure he never spoke again. The courtroom turns grave. Even the hum of cameras seems to vanish. Judge Price's fingers hover above the documents, her voice trembling just once. Mr. Raines, how did you get this? Michael exhales. Because I was supposed to destroy it. Sarah zooms in on one photo. A middle-aged man with tired eyes and a faint smile, found lifeless in his apartment 10 years prior. His name, David Kellner, flashes on the courtroom monitor as Michael's voice cracks. He was my friend. We worked the same case before they called it suicide. The screens show his signature beside Corbett's authorization, time-stamped the day before Kellner's death. The courtroom exhales as one, horror breaking through disbelief. Ortega shifts uneasily, recognizing the name from an old report buried under inconclusive. Judge Price calls for a recess to verify the authenticity, but Sarah interrupts, reading the live feed in her earpiece. Federal Archives just confirmed Kellner's file was classified, sealed, and now missing. Judge Price freezes, her eyes narrowing. Michael looks up. Not missing, he says. Hidden. Until now. The thunder outside answers him, rolling through the city like a warning the world ignored for too long. Just as the clerk prepares to enter the evidence into record, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 federal agents stride in, their coats dripping from the storm, credentials flashing like weapons. By order of the Department of Justice, this proceeding is to be suspended immediately, one declares. The tension fractures into chaos. Reporters shout, cameras pivot, and Judge Price stands, her authority filling the room. This court is under federal jurisdiction, she says coldly. Not yours. The taller agent meets her gaze. Man, the integrity of national security is at stake. Michael rises, voice sharp. That's what they said 10 years ago, right before they buried the truth. Silence falls. The agents exchange glances, then turn to leave, defeated by the cameras still broadcasting live. As the doors close, Judge Price's gavel strikes hard. The evidence stays. The people stay. And this trial continues. The courtroom erupts in applause. Quiet, trembling, unstoppable. When calm returns, Michael reaches into his coat again, this time pulling out a small silver flash drive attached to a broken keychain. "Everything they erased is here," he says. "Every transfer, every falsified record, every death." The courtroom vibrates with tension as he hands it to the bailiff, who passes it to the clerk. On the screen behind Judge Price, lines of data begin to scroll. Offshore accounts, encrypted transactions, coded messages from Corbett's firm to government contractors. The truth unfolds like scripture, rewritten in light. Sarah narrates softly into her microphone, her voice trembling. "The evidence is live. It's real." Corbett, restrained in the hallway, screams faintly in protest. Michael stares at the data, his expression unreadable. "They took my life," he whispers, "but they couldn't take my proof." The courtroom feels holy, every spectator aware that they are watching the resurrection of truth from the tombs of bureaucracy. Judge Price leans forward, her tone steady but heavy with emotion. "Mr. Raines, before we proceed further, I need you to take the oath again. Everything you've stated, everything you've shown, you swear it is the truth." Michael's gaze meets hers, unwavering. "On everything I've lost, I swear." The judge nods, her voice carrying the quiet gravity of a nation listening. "Then let it be entered into record that the witness has presented verified evidence of corruption at the highest level." A murmur spreads, soft but electrified. Sarah's eyes glisten. Ortega lowers his head, whispering a silent apology to the man he once dismissed. Outside, the storm begins to break, a faint ray of sunlight piercing through the clouds as if the world itself sighs in relief. Michael closes his eyes. For the first time in years, the air feels clean. As the storm fades into uneasy calm, the courthouse becomes a fortress of tension. Federal agents surround the building, unmarked vehicles idle at every exit. Inside, the lights flicker, power uncertain, motives even more so. Judge Price pauses proceedings for security review, but beneath her calm voice, fear hides like a shadow behind her words. Michael sits alone at the witness stand, the quiet hum of cameras his only comfort. His phone vibrates. A message from an unknown number. "Leave now, or you'll never leave." He doesn't flinch. Instead, he shows it to Detective Ortega, who curses under his breath. "They're moving fast," Ortega mutters. Michael exhales slowly. Faster than the truth, maybe. But not fast enough. Sarah watches from across the aisle, her eyes widening as she catches sight of plain clothes, men whispering by the doors. Somewhere between the marble walls and glowing screens, Justice stands at gunpoint, silent, waiting to see who will speak next. During the recess, chaos erupts. Two figures in dark coats push past security, shouting credentials that no one has time to verify. The sound of struggle ripples through the corridors, shouts, a crash, a gun clattering to the floor. Ortega draws his weapon instinctively, shouting for backup. Michael is rushed into a side chamber, Sarah following close behind, her camera rolling despite the fear slicing through her. In the confusion, a single shot echoes, sharp and final. Silence swallows everything. Judge Price stands frozen as the courtroom doors slam open. Ortega emerging with one hand bloody but steady. "They tried to take him," he says, "but they failed." Michael steps out moments later, pale but unhurt, holding the same flash drive that nearly cost him his life. "They're not afraid of the truth," he says quietly, his voice echoing through the stunned courtroom. "They're afraid of losing control." In the CNN control room, chaos mirrors the courthouse. Producers shout over one another as the feed stutters, government pressure mounting to cut transmission. "They're calling it a breach of national security," someone yells. But Sarah's handheld footage starts streaming live through a secondary link, unfiltered, unstoppable. On every screen, viewers see Michael's defiance, Ortega's bravery, and the shot that tried to silence truth. The anchor's voice breaks mid-sentence as Sarah's raw footage overtakes the main broadcast. "This is not just a courtroom story," she narrates breathlessly. "This is America on trial." The control room erupts, half in panic, half in awe. Across the world, millions watch a system unravel before their eyes, the very architecture of secrecy collapsing in real time. For the first time in history, truth has hacked its way through fear. When order returns, Judge Price stands before a courtroom now transformed into history's stage. Her voice, calm but commanding, cuts through the tension like steel through fog. "Every threat against this court is a threat against justice itself. Let the record show that intimidation will not decide this case." Her words resound like scripture. The audience, once restless, now sits silent, reverent. She turns to Michael. "You've risked everything to bring this forward. From this moment, you are under full federal protection by court order." Michael shakes his head gently. "I didn't come here for protection," he says. "I came here to make sure no one else dies for telling the truth." Her expression softens, pride shadowed by sorrow. "Then let's make sure it wasn't in vain." She lifts the gavel once more, a sound of defiance against the machine that sought to silence them all. As the court adjourns for the evening, Sarah steps into the rain-soaked steps outside, phone in hand. Her inbox floods with encrypted files, thousands of documents from anonymous sources. One message stands out. "You started it. Now finish it." Attached are complete records confirming everything Michael revealed. And more. She looks up at the courthouse glowing in the distance, her reflection caught in the puddle at her feet. The truth is no longer confined to four walls. It's spreading, unstoppable, alive. Across the city, servers light up with leaks, documents pouring into public networks before the government can react. Michael watches from the steps, rain washing over his face, his burden finally shared. "It's out," Sarah whispers, her voice trembling. "It's everywhere." Michael closes his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. The truth, once buried, has become immortal. The next morning, Washington awakens to chaos, disguised as calm. Streets are eerily empty, yet the city hums with invisible tension. Black SUVs parked at intersections, unmarked helicopters circling above. CNN's coverage has gone dark, their studios raided for national security review. Social media burns with fragments of the leaked files, spreading faster than any government can contain. In a modest safe house near the Potomac, Michael sits by a cracked window, listening to the muffled world outside. Ortega guards the door, restless, checking his weapon every few minutes. Sarah types feverishly on her laptop, trying to salvage the story before it disappears from the web. "They're pulling the feeds," she mutters. Michael smiles faintly. Then they're too late. His voice is calm, prophetic. Once truth is spoken, it never goes quiet again. The lights flicker, the power's dying, or being killed. For a breathless moment, all they hear is rain and the echo of inevitability. The silence shatters. Doors burst open with deafening force, armed agents flooding the safe house, shouting commands over the roar of breaking glass. Ortega returns fire instinctively, shouting for Sarah to run. Michael stays still, clutching the flash drive to his chest as if it were sacred. The chaos unfolds in slow motion, flashlights cutting through smoke, shouts blending with thunder. One agent lunges, seizing Michael by the arm, but stops when the cameras roll again. Sarah's phone live streaming the raid to millions. "We're alive!" she screams, her voice cutting through the chaos like a siren. The agents freeze, faces pale. Outside, crowds are already gathering, drawn by the broadcast. Ortega lowers his gun, hands trembling, his face streaked with sweat and rain. "You can't kill the truth on camera," Michael says quietly. And just like that, the storm passes. The agents retreat under public eyes, leaving behind a room of survivors who have turned fear into defiance. By evening, The storm shifts from the streets to the Capitol. Every network, every feed, every encrypted channel now carries the evidence. Unfiltered, undeniable. Senators deny, corporations panic, and emergency meetings erupt behind locked doors. Judge Price, confined to chambers under federal protection, watches from her laptop as the country she swore to serve begins to fracture. The president's spokesperson calls it an act of cyber terrorism, but the people call it something else: justice. Across the nation, protests ignite like brush fire, citizens carrying placards that read, "Michael spoke for us all." In the chaos, Corbett's firm shutters, its accounts frozen. But in the silence of her office, Judge Price smiles faintly. "Truth," she whispers, "is the one verdict no one can overturn." Outside her window, the streets glow with candles. A vigil for the living symbol of truth they almost lost. Hours later, Michael vanishes. One moment, Ortega returns with supplies. The next, the chair by the window sits empty, the blanket still warm. Sarah drops her laptop, panic flashing in her eyes. The flash drive remains on the table beside a folded note. "The truth belongs to everyone. Don't look for me." Ortega scans the perimeter, shouting into the storm. But there's no trace. No footprints, no forced exit, nothing. It's as if the rain swallowed him whole. Sarah's voice cracks as she whispers, "He knew this would happen." Ortega nods, eyes dark with understanding. Maybe he wanted it too. They stand in silence as sirens wail outside, the city now alive with protest and peril. Somewhere, a homeless man fades into the crowd once more. Nameless, faceless, but immortal in what he left behind. By dawn, the streets overflow with light, candles, phones, and signs glowing against the Capitol skyline. Across the world, news anchors speak his name as legend, not victim. "Michael reigns," they say. "The man who proved one voice can rewrite a nation." CNN resumes broadcasting, this time uncensored. Sarah at the anchor's desk, her eyes still rimmed with sleepless conviction. Ortega stands beside her off camera, protective but proud. "We're not here to make history," she says into the lens. "We're here to remember what truth costs, and why it's worth paying for." The screen fades to footage of Michael walking through DC's backstreets months before, blending into the forgotten. The invisible messenger who carried the weight of justice to the doorstep of power. The nation listens. The world remembers. And somewhere beyond the reach of headlines, a quiet figure walks beneath the sunrise, free at last. The courthouse steps have turned into the people's podium. The barricades once meant to divide now form a stage where citizens gather beneath banners of truth. From New York to Los Angeles, crowds chant in one voice, not for vengeance, but for reform. Judge Price emerges, escorted by officers who now protect, not threaten. She stands before the sea of faces, wind tugging at her robe as microphones extend from every direction. "Justice does not belong to walls," she declares, her voice amplified across continents. "It belongs to those who demand it." The applause roars, swelling like thunder through the avenues. On nearby screens, Sarah reports live, her words threading history with emotion. Ortega stands watchful among the crowd, scanning faces, perhaps hoping to glimpse Michael once more. But the man who began it all remains unseen. His truth carried by millions now, a revolution with no single name and no single leader. Inside the Capitol, the highest offices tremble. The Attorney General's press conference begins under glaring lights and tighter jaws. "We will investigate," he says, "but we urge restraint." Yet his words fall flat, drowned by the echo of public awakening. Whistleblowers begin to emerge, emboldened by Michael's defiance. One after another, officials come forward, each confession tearing another seam in the fabric of silence. Judge Price watches the live feed from her chambers, a rare smile crossing her face. "You can't command truth," she murmurs. "You can only join it." Across town, Sarah's newsroom erupts with breaking updates. Files from multiple agencies flood her inbox, each a new nail in the coffin of corruption. And in the quiet corner of her screen, a live chat message blinks once. You kept your promise. No sender, no trace. But she knows the voice. Detective Ortega sits in his car under the courthouse's shadow, the rain tapping gently on the windshield. His badge lies on the dashboard beside an unopened letter. His resignation. He speaks softly into a recorder, his words meant not for command but for conscience. I failed him once, he says, but I won't fail the next one who comes forward. He opens the door and steps into the drizzle, walking toward the station not as a cop, but as a man reborn through regret. The city hums with new energy, signs of protest mingling with laughter, hope blending with healing. As he crosses the street, a mural catches his eye. Michael's face painted in gold and gray, his eyes calm, watching over the city. Ortega stops, rain dripping from his hat, and whispers, "You did it." For the first time in years, he feels clean. In the CNN studio, the atmosphere is reverent. Sarah sits beneath the glowing lights, broadcasting live one final segment. Today, she says, her voice steady yet full of emotion, we close this chapter not with anger, but with gratitude, because one man's courage reminded us all that justice isn't a system. It's a choice. She pauses, the silence carrying more power than words. Behind her, images of Michael. In the courtroom, in the rain, in the unknown. Fade one by one until only a black screen remains. Wherever you are, she whispers, thank you. For a brief moment, every channel, every feed, and every device across the country falls into synchronized silence. It is not censorship this time. It is respect. And in that stillness, truth finds its eternal echo. Weeks later, under the soft amber glow of dusk, a man walks through Lafayette Park wearing a worn coat and carrying nothing but a folded newspaper. He pauses before a street performer singing a ballad about justice and loss. As the song ends, the man drops a single coin into the open guitar case, a coin engraved with the scales of justice. The musician looks up, puzzled, but the man is already gone, disappearing into the slow-moving crowd. The camera lingers on the bench where he sat moments before, the newspaper left behind. On its front page, Truth Act signed into law. National protection for whistleblowers. The wind flips the page once, revealing a small handwritten note on the margin. Truth never dies. M.O.R. The screen fades to black as the city lights flicker alive. One by one, across the night, a year passes. The world, though still flawed, feels different, lighter, more awake. The Truth Act has become law, protecting voices that once trembled in the dark. The courthouse where it all began now, there's a bronze plaque. In honor of Michael Raines, the man who spoke when silence ruled. Students gather there on field trips, touching the cold metal as if to feel the pulse of courage itself. Judge Price, now Chief Justice, visits the site quietly each morning before hearings. She kneels to brush away the fallen leaves from the plaque, whispering, "You changed us." Cameras flash, but she doesn't flinch. Across the city, Sarah's newsroom has transformed into a beacon of transparency, her team dedicated to protecting truth-tellers worldwide. Somewhere in the vastness of the crowd, a man in a worn coat walks unseen, his face hidden by sunlight, neither myth nor martyr, but proof that one voice can still move mountains. Months later, a new institution opens its doors, the Michael Raines Foundation for Ethical Journalism and Whistleblower Advocacy. Sarah stands before the crowd, voice clear, conviction unwavering. This isn't a memorial, she says. It's a beginning. Inside, walls are lined with quotes about justice and transparency. Ortega, now retired, trains young investigators, teaching them to listen before judging. A portrait of Michael hangs near the entrance, captured mid-speech, his eyes filled with unshakable humanity. During the ribbon cutting, Sarah pauses, sensing a presence she can't explain. A whisper in the wind, the faint rustle of a coat. Truth doesn't vanish, she says softly to the crowd. It evolves, through every one of us who dares to speak it. Applause rises, and sunlight streams through the glass roof, painting golden streaks across the plaque beneath his name. Late one night, Sarah sits alone in her office surrounded by glowing monitors. A package arrives with no return address. Inside, a single handwritten letter sealed with wax. Her hands tremble as she opens it. Sarah, the truth is safe now. Don't let them turn it into noise. Remember, justice isn't loud. It's steady. When the world forgets, remind them that silence was once the law, and we broke it. M.R. Tears slip down her cheeks as she folds the letter carefully, placing it in her drawer beside her press badge. She looks out the window at the city below, streets alive with people marching not in protest but in progress. The letter's words echo through her heart, a compass guiding her beyond the chaos of headlines. Somewhere, unseen, the writer watches the skyline, the faintest smile crossing his face before fading back into anonymity. Judge Price delivers her final public address before retirement at the Supreme Court steps. Her gray hair glimmers beneath the noon light as cameras capture the stillness around her. Justice, she begins, is not perfection, it's persistence. The willingness to stand again and again for what is right, even when no one claps. Her gaze sweeps across the gathered crowd. Students, journalists, families holding candles in tribute. One man reminded us that truth, though fragile, cannot be destroyed. Today, I leave this bench knowing justice lives not in rulings but in courage. As applause swells, her voice softens into a whisper only the wind seems to hear. Rest well, Michael. The world heard you. The crowd bows their heads in silence. Overhead, the flag flutters against a boundless blue sky, a symbol of law reborn through sacrifice. As dusk settles over the National Mall, a man walks alone along the reflecting pool. The monument lights shimmer across the water, blurring history and present into one endless mirror. His coat flutters lightly in the evening breeze. His steps are unhurried, content. Voices of children echo in the distance, laughter blending with the faint hum of a city, learning to breathe again. He pauses before the Lincoln Memorial, the marble face of the nation's conscience staring down upon him. From his pocket, he removes a small folded photograph, a courtroom, a judge, a reporter, a detective, and smiles. They finished it, he murmurs, voice barely audible. Then, with one final look toward the skyline, he drops the photo into the water, where it drifts away beneath the shimmering reflection of the Capitol dome. The camera lingers as he walks into the shadowed streets, fading into legend, leaving behind only ripples and light.